What is a blockchain? IBM has a good starting definition that we can take apart. IBM says a blockchain is a shared, immutable ledger that facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets in a business network. Now, there's a lot going on there, but there are several pieces that we can get into. And as we do that, just keep in mind a shared Google Sheet that you probably shared with your friends or your colleagues or your supply chain partners, and we'll build on top of that till we get to a blockchain. And we'll call out the differences between a centralized database versus a blockchain-based decentralized database as we go along. So just like that Google Sheet, even a blockchain-based database, a blockchain has multiple parties. Now here comes the first difference versus a centralized database. A blockchain-based database is usually replicated, which means a local copy is stored across each computer that accesses it, usually. Now, how will all of those local copies be reconciled and one source of truth, an agreement around what the truth is, be arrived at? That's topic for the next video, which is going to be around consensus mechanisms. Just like a traditional Google Sheet, you can set different permissions or rights about who can access it, who can view it, who can edit it to which level. And that lends itself to two types of databases, two types of blockchains, public and private. In a public blockchain, usually anyone can access it as long as they have an internet connection. An example of this type of a blockchain is Bitcoin. Anyone can access it, which means it lends itself well to anonymity. You don't have to disclose who you are. On the other end of the spectrum are private blockchains, usually common in enterprise company settings. An example of that is WeTrade, which is a trade finance consortium. It's a network of banks where you select which company and who within that company has what types of access rights. So to enable this, you really need identity of the people who are involved in that. You can't have anonymous people just updating it. You want a tighter control. So that's an example of a private blockchain. A blockchain is immutable, which means history cannot be altered. Now here comes the next source of difference between a Google Sheet and a blockchain. Right? In a Google Sheet, let's say I've made 3 payments to you. $5, $4, $3, and you paid me $12, so we're actually even. In a Google Sheet, you can just more or less override all of these and just say, all right, there's nothing that happened, so there's zero balance. But in a blockchain, it's auditable and it is permanent. So the transactions that have already happened in the past, you cannot erase them, you cannot undo them. The only thing you can do, you cannot change the previous ones. The only thing you can do is add another transaction that says you paid the $12 to me. And that's how we get back to zero. Okay. So a blockchain is permanent and it is auditable. Ledger. Ledger means database or a record. What can you use a blockchain for? You can use it for recording transactions and tracking assets. Think of these two items as columns in an Excel or in a Google Sheet. You can enter any type of data. Right? For example, what items are you buying? Their description. What condition are they in? Where are they stored? What's the value? And if it's assets like cars that you're talking about, that your company owns, you can talk about whether they're leased or owned. Who's the vendor? When was it bought? What are the terms of the purchase or the lease? And finally, we come to networks. You'll hear a lot about networks in future videos. Bitcoin is a network. Ethereum is a network. Almost any cryptocurrency-based protocol that you have heard of, any blockchain-based setup that you've heard of is likely a network. A network is an umbrella term used to describe all the different participants that have access to a particular blockchain. Each of those participants or each of those computers that accesses the blockchain is referred to as a node. In the enterprise space, there is something called a consortium, which is a network of companies that get together and agree to share data or update a blockchain-based database in a predetermined way. So there are rules governing this. An example of an enterprise blockchain consortium is R3, which is a network of banks network of financial services firms. We'll get into R3 in a later video. Why are we spending time on networks? Just like in the traditional world, think of social media, where you probably joined Instagram because many of your friends were already on Instagram. So the value of that network became more powerful the more of your friends were on it, right? That same mechanism is at play even in blockchain. The scale of adoption is almost more important than the technological superiority. So Bitcoin and Ethereum have the widest adoption now among blockchain networks. And it's going to be hard to overcome them just with a slightly better technological feature, right? So there is a law that governs networks called Metcalfe's law, which says that the value of a network grows not linearly but exponentially as more and more people join it. And this explains a lot of the behavior that you see in the blockchain space, where any new blockchain startup or a protocol that is launched, it's trying to get to wide adoption right away, because a large scale of adoption is really, it helps defend against rival networks being launched with slightly different technological features. So scale of adoption of a network is as important, if not more important, than the technological superiority. Okay. All right. Now let's go back to the definition and recap it. So blockchain is simply shared, which means multiple parties can access it. Immutable, which means history cannot be altered. Ledger, which means database, that facilitates a process of recording transactions and tracking assets in a network. Doesn't have to be business. All right. Now this was just an introduction to the definition of blockchain. There are a lot more things we'll get into in future videos, but hope this was helpful. Let me know in comments if how you found this. If you liked the video, hit like, and if you can, please subscribe to this channel so that you'll get notified whenever there's a new video. Thank you.